All right, let's talk about one of India's most perplexing and honestly heartbreaking mysteries. Picture this. It's October 2nd, 2012. A young woman named Sanam Hasan is celebrating her 19th birthday at a party. But by the next morning, she's dead. And what happened next kicked off an investigation so full of bizarre twists that it left everyone, from the local police to the country's top investigators, completely baffled.
And really, the whole case boils down to one central fact, a fact that just seems medically impossible. You see, when doctors performed the autopsy on Sanam, they found something that made no sense at all. The question that stumped everyone was this: how on earth did a young woman end up with the heart of a man inside her body? This single, bizarre finding sent the entire investigation spinning.
So just look at what the initial autopsy report laid out. On one hand, it seemed straightforward. The cause of death was an alcohol overdose that led to a heart attack. Okay, and they also confirmed that semen samples were present. But then there was that third finding, the one that broke the case wide open. Protein tests on the heart proved it was from a male, and here's the kicker: Sanam had never had heart surgery in her life. So how is that even possible? Before we get any deeper into all the weird evidence, I think it's really important we take a step back and talk about who Sanam Hasan was. Because this isn't just a collection of bizarre facts. It's the story of a real person, a young woman whose life was cut tragically short. Sanam was just 19 years old. She was in her second year of fashion design school in Pune. Now, her family lived in Mumbai, but she was really determined, to make it on her own. She wasn't just studying, she was also working part-time at a shoe store and was a really talented football player. Everyone who knew her described her as this driven, happy person who had tons of friends from both college and work. So let's just walk through the timeline of her last day. October 2nd, 2012, it's her 19th birthday. Her parents drive over from Mumbai to spend the day with her, celebrating. That night, a work colleague of hers, a guy named Monish Vijay, throws a birthday party for her at his friend's apartment. Then, the next morning, her parents get that phone call every parent dreads. Sanam's in the hospital, and her life is over. The police, of course, got on the scene right away. When a young woman dies after a party, the first, most logical thing to do is to look at who was there with her. So the investigation kicked off with a room full of potential witnesses and, maybe, a suspect. And this is where things get interesting. We're not talking about 2 or 3 people. The police brought in all 17 people who attended that party for questioning. And this group was a mix of everyone in her life. College friends, colleagues from the showroom. Every single person there that night was now under a microscope. Now, you'd think the investigators had a slam dunk. They had DNA from the semen samples found on Sanam's body. So they did the logical thing. They took DNA samples from all 17 people at the party, including the guy who organized it, Monish. And the results? Absolutely nothing. A complete and total dead end. Not a single person at that party was a match. And just like that, the case got a whole lot more complicated. So, with the DNA evidence leading nowhere, the investigation had to completely change direction. The focus now shifted to the 2 things that made no sense: the missing DNA match and, of course, the whole impossible male heart situation. Was this some kind of perfectly planned crime, or just a tragic series of unbelievable mistakes? It took years, but eventually the CBI, that's India's top investigating agency, they came up with a theory for the male heart. And it really just shows you how one simple mistake can throw an entire case off course. They found out that on the very same day as Sanam's autopsy, 4 other bodies were also being processed in that same facility. And, crucially, the medical staff had completely failed to video record the procedures, which is actually required by law. So, the CBI concluded the most likely answer wasn't some medical freak of nature event, but just a terrible, terrible mistake, a sample mix-up by the doctors. And if you look at the timeline of the investigation itself, you can see just how cold this case became over time. It started with the local Pune police back in 2012. 2 years later, with 0 progress, it gets handed up to the crime branch, and then eventually to the CBI. With each new agency taking over, there was hope for a breakthrough, but the mystery just kept getting deeper. I mean, they tried everything, and nothing worked. It got so desperate that in 2016, the CBI got permission to do something pretty drastic. They exhumed Sanam's body from her grave, all to collect new DNA samples for retesting. And even that turned up nothing. No new evidence, no new leads. It was like the entire trail had just vanished into thin air. So, where does that leave us today? Well, the case of Sanam Hasan is still officially unsolved. And what's left are two powerful but completely contradictory stories. Depending on who you ask, her death was either a horrible accident or it was a brutal murder that was somehow perfectly covered up. For Sanam's family, there's absolutely no doubt in their minds. They are adamant that their daughter, who was a dedicated athlete, never, ever drank alcohol. They believe she was forced to drink that night, that she was sexually assaulted, and that she was murdered. This is the story they've held onto for years, a desperate plea for justice. And this is really the heart of the whole mystery. On one side, you've got unidentified male DNA on her body. That screams foul play, right? But then, that DNA didn't match anyone at the party. Her parents swear she never drank, but her friends who were there say she was drinking. It's like every single piece of evidence that points to murder is immediately canceled out by another piece of evidence that suggests something else entirely. So we're left with that one huge unanswered question. Was Sanam Hasan the victim of a calculated murder carried out by someone who has just never been caught? Or was her death just a tragic series of events, an accidental overdose made so much worse by catastrophic mistakes in the investigation that followed? More than a decade later, the truth is still buried, leaving behind only questions and a family that is still waiting for an answer.